Λοιπόν, να προσκαλέσουμε στο βήμα τώρα.
Let us now give the floor to Costas Balaras. I think most of you know who he is. First and foremost, he is actually the man behind the establishment of the Hellenic chapter of ASHRAE. Right now, he is vice president of ASHRAE, and he is also in charge of the research institute of the National Observatory of Athens. He is going to talk about developments in terms of energy regulations, the new regulation, KENAG in Greece, or else Energy Performance Buildings Regulation. Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome. It's been a long day for everyone, but then again, gradually, I think we have started shaping some knowledge and an idea, now being better informed and well-versed in the issues that we are called upon to handle. It was a good thing to have our dear guests with us, for you see, we've had so many dear guests who flew in from abroad and they've proceeded with making their own presentations. And now we know that when we talk about European data and Greek data, they are quite revelatory as concerns the size of the problem. But then again, it turns out that we're all more or less faced with the same issue. And moreover, it turns out that the issues on our agenda are issues and problems for other colleagues of ours elsewhere in Europe. So, given that background, now we are drawing a conclusion. It's true that we are hugely dependent on mostly fossil fuel, and this is a reality both in Greece and the rest of Europe, and this is an issue that we need to tackle. And then, where are we headed to? Or rather, where is that energy used and where is it wasted? For it turns out that the main issue, the very issue that we are dealing with, thanks to this day event, turns out to be not merely theoretical, but rather really essential. We, dear colleagues, are all consumers. We are all living in the same building. We are all working within the same building. We are all paying the price for keeping it operative. So we're all paying for that. So what you do on a daily basis in your offices, in your construction, in your working site, in your building, whatever you do is quite important. And of course, everything matters, and we have to remember that this is an issue for everyone and that every building which we live or work in generates costs. And I insist on these issues, among others, because we've been talking about saving energy. And maybe some tend to forget about the fact that, first and foremost, we need to make sure that we achieve the basic target, which is for us to have a qualitative environment, a healthy environment, a comfortable environment in which we live, and then all solutions will come and follow suit. Remember what you heard about today, what we all saw through the presentations that preceded mine. I particularly like the fact that throughout this day, other speakers insisted on the fact that one of the main issues we're faced with is linked to the fact that we have millions and millions of existing buildings. That's the stock. And this doesn't just regard Greece, but also Europe. There you have the graph, which depicts the current situation in Europe. And this is quite a telling graph. And now you can see what sort of figures we're talking about. Remember what we heard this morning? 40% on average energy consumption. This is the average for both Europe and Greece. So, of course, Depending on the size of countries and type of buildings, indeed, in some countries you have greater population, so you have more buildings there, and as a result thereof, those countries are consuming more energy. It makes sense. And here we are. There you have Greece, 38%. So 40 is a good figure. Let's stick to that. Now, 40% of the pie will go to those buildings. It's wasted through those buildings. And that is why we are called upon today to act, to react, given that this is a basic issue. And of course, residences, residential buildings account for most of that, 40%. And what we heard about today is yet another thing that we are all aware of, I guess. We know that existing buildings are sort of naked or stripped. It sounds sexy, but in practice, if you just look into that, you will come to realize that these buildings are unshielded. They are sort of bleeding into the environment. They are losing energy. The majority of our buildings is not actually preserving energy, saving energy. Now, it's a good thing to know that Europe, the EU, has its specific goals. It has its own path. It has its course, which it's been following. And we know that maybe this will be fashionable for a couple of years and then there will be another target set. Well, we have European targets. And it's true that what the president of the Technical Chamber of Greece said, yes, there are impediments. Yes, there are difficulties. But let's remember that there is a European-wide set of goals, and we have to know that the goals are clear. We have to decide about the procedures and processes. It's also true that quite recently there have been corrective actions undertaken. All these objectives seem to be working out. And I have a problem with my laser pointer here, says the speaker. In any case, it turns out that all the targets, the objectives that the EU has set are working out, it's happening. Now, 20% of the greenhouse emissions, yes, the 20% drop is there. 20%, well, of the RES is in now. We've increased the use of renewable energy sources in terms of generating energy and power, and now we are working towards achieving that other goal about saving energy. The president of the Technical Chamber of Greece this morning presented you with the details of developments in the background in terms of Greek legislation. This is an overview. I'll just show you a few things. The EPBD was recast. So you have the EPBD recast back in 2010, and now we are called upon to proceed with the relevant enforcement of the legislation. And we also have the energy services, which is now being revised. So it's being amended. It's yet another directive. And one might expect that this was an edifice that was started a few years ago. So now it's quite complex, and that is hard to explain. Well, given what we said, when we embarked on this journey for years on end, it's true that people were trying very hard to get the legislation in place. And we decided when we embarked on this adventure that we were going to have something in place, and then we're going to see whether it works out, and then we're going to make amends for what's not working. What is true is that now all engineers are interested in making progress, and it's true. And the Technical Chamber of Greece president this morning underscored the fact that all engineers and architects are interested in making progress. So they're all collectively working together in the same direction. They're working together towards the same direction. I'm an engineer myself, and I know how things were. I'm aware of how it all began and how, from a scientific point of view, things developed. And then we were faced, that's true, with a major change, which also had a major impact in our field. And one of the issues is certainly the issue of technical directives, the Greek ones. Now we are all aware of the fact that instructions and technical directives have been changing and amended. even within a year. They are amended within a year, and this is a major change. For you see, there is obviously the interests of the Technical Chamber of Greece and the interests of our colleagues. They are all really involved, actively involved in making changes and making a difference, even in terms of technical directives and instructions. This slide concerns technical directives and instructions. Now we are faced with another technical directive on cogeneration, and we are awaiting for a couple more, which will all come to help us prop up the new regulation, KINAC in Greek, and the implementation and enforcement thereof. At this stage, at this point in time, we are faced with a certain reality, and it's quite apparent, I think, that by now there will be more developments. It's clear by now there will be more developments. It's clear by now that there's more to come, because you see the new regulation impacts on all the cogs in this machinery. Consultation began on KINAC. Those of us who had a chance to look at the EPBD recast took part in the consultation because the relevant Greek legislation was drafted in the meantime, and maybe some of you, dear colleagues, who are attending this event today were among those agencies and other relevant bodies that came up with 332 relevant comments. You made your comments, you made your remarks. Rest assured that each and every one of your comments and remarks was taken into account, and it's worth being involved in any sort of deliberation or consultation, because each and every remark and comment one makes goes to a committee, and the committee has to assess that, and it takes into account what is there with a view to improving legislation. Rest assured that everything was taken into account for us to make sure we get optimum results. We had the EPBD recast, which also brought a number of issues to our attention. There was the methodology and comparing energy efficiency measurements. So there was talk about laxity on certain measures or making some measures more strict. And there was also the building, reference building, one of the proposals that was actually endorsed by many people, regarded the reference building. The building of reference was a whole idea, a new concept, and some also suggested, or rather, let me open a parenthesis, there was at that time a European project in progress. It was underway, which was going to use the building of reference, and I'll close the parenthesis, maybe we'll come back to that later. This slide provides you with an overview of the draft law on energy performance buildings. So there was reference to the general framework for methodology, minimum requirements for energy efficiency, energy performance, minimum requirements for the new buildings and the old buildings, the existing buildings. What else was there? Did we actually realize, all of us, that ZEBs, zero energy buildings, are almost part and parcel of our reality? Have we realized by now that ZEBs are a reality? It's not something that's out there in outer space. It's not just a blueprint. It's not something that is theoretical. These are true buildings that are real. And some of my colleagues who are in this audience today have actually lived in those very buildings or worked in them. So zero energy buildings, ZEBs, are reality, are our reality. They are not just being designed. What you, dear participants, do on a daily basis, what you design, what you study, what you're planning on, what you're building will eventually become our reality, our daily reality, 2024 ZEBs are part of our commitments. This is what we aspire to get to by the year 2021, January 1st, 2021, and then this also regards public buildings as of January 1st, 2019. Moreover, the draft legislation on energy performance buildings also embraces or rather involves certification. Since everything's changing, let's have a look at the legal framework. This is a slide coming from the internet. You have access to the internet. There are constant changes, so you can always go to the website of the Ministry of the Environment. I'm also sure you can get access to relevant information through the Technical Chamber of Greece website. You can keep track of changes, developments, and updates this way. Now, this slide touches on the software that we produced in cooperation with or rather the software that was produced by the Technical Chamber of Greece and which refers to the new regulation, KENAC. Moreover, pretty soon we are going to kick off with the inspections of boilers and heating and air conditioning facilities. Then everything will be punched in the main system using again the same software, and so we are going to have the building GR. So these are data that are collected on a daily basis. Every day we have more and more input. We have had more than 214,000 certificates, energy performance certificates so far. Some regarded pieces of real estate that were on sale, others pieces of real estate that were rented out. And moreover, there's something that we sort of expected and something which you sort of knew about because you yourselves have time and again gone to the relevant Greek authorities to get a new building permit, and you've also received phone calls by customers of yours who wanted to consult with you about a new building they were working on. Yes, there is a deluge of events, and it's true that right now the construction sector is on a downward trend, and this impacts on the number of certificates issued. If you actually have a look at the overall image, this is no profound analysis, but just counting on the data we have based on certificates issued, we have 4 climatic zones in Greece, and it turns out that the majority of certificates issued for residences, for houses, is category H. And then we also have tertiary sector buildings, and it turns out that in all 4 zones, tertiary sector buildings are doing better from an energy consumption point of view by comparison. And this is just, like I said before, one first view of the statistical data we have. If we break data down into construction periods, you have buildings grouped depending on the decades they were built. It turns out that in all 4 climatic zones, results are the one we rather expected. For as time goes by and buildings get newer or buildings are built now, their behavior is better in terms of energy consumption, because at a certain point in time there was a thermal insulation regulation drafted by the state, which has now been improving and improving, so we can eventually, if we make proper use of the relevant regulation and legislation, get to the point where we will have zero energy buildings, ZEBs. Now, this is another slide. We have some energy certificates issued by other countries, not just Greece, but they are all more or less alike. And then you have the other side. The slide on the right shows you what's happening in the United States of America. It's been ASHRAE ASHRAE has been working on energy certificates for buildings in the States. Or rather, let me rephrase that. Let me first show you that those certificates are not accidentally similar. You see, there is some sort of correlation. There are some similarities between the US certificate and the European ones. You see, there are similarities in terms of categories and in terms of colors. Now, in this case, we are faced with a certificate, an energy certificate, which has a dual classification. You have two different categories. You have one evaluation on the basis of how it was designed and another evaluation counting on what it does right now, how it works right now, what sort of operational behavior, if you will, you have. So there you have this dual perception and evaluation. You have the theoretical evaluation and its real condition. And then to get the relevant ASHRAE certificate, you have to be accredited by ASHRAE to show your customer that you are indeed able and capable of issuing such certificates. And then there are other labels as well. I'm sure you can make a comparison. Some are quite known to you. There's no overlapping among them because now there are specific features that are being included in this ASHRAE certificate. Here you have a website, so just log on to the web and follow developments through it. ASHRAE certification. ASHRAE provides professional designations that showcase certification earners' body of knowledge to the industry. There are programs that actually cover healthcare facilities design or high-performance buildings, and they span a whole field. So you can go all the way to building energy modeling, professional certifications, or BEAP. BEMP and BEAP are necessary for anyone to get the ASHRAE certificate issued. What's of interest is the fact that next Saturday we're going to have, for the very first time in Greece, the very first effort made with a view to us providing those interested colleagues of ours with a chance to take the test. And so, as of next Saturday, our Greek colleagues can get the certification and they no longer have to go to the other side of the Atlantic. The next ASHRAE meeting is scheduled for Dallas, Texas, January 2013. If you are interested in flying there, it's worth the visit because a huge exhibition, the biggest in the States, will also be taking place at that point in time. But now I was referring to the forthcoming examinations that are scheduled for October 20. If it turns out that there are more interested candidates, we could possibly have another test run in the future. So if you're interested in doing that, just get in touch with my dear colleague Dimitris Haralabopoulos, who's also handling that along everything else. But he's done an excellent job as well because, like I said, next Saturday we are going to have the first test for those colleagues of ours who've already expressed interest in taking the test. What about energy inspectors in Greece? I know that this venture has begun. How many of you are energy inspectors? Good. So you are the heroes who assumed full responsibility for handling these and for performing such duties. There are others to come, but you were the first who kicked off, and it was tough. The beginning was difficult. You see, the whole venture's been through different stages. Just like we had today, we expected those temporary licenses to expire by October 2012, and now that deadline's been extended and the licenses are valid through October 6, 2013. And those of you who were in the first batch of inspectors, you probably can recall the situation through the photos I'm showing you. And now, dear colleagues, you are a few out of these 8,304 temporary energy inspectors who are active right now. In due time, we are going to have permanent inspectors too, which is exactly what the Technical Chamber of Greece president said this morning. He said that the relevant committees are already in place, and thanks to the contribution and participation of the Technical Chamber of Greece, eventually we're going to have a test sometime next year, hopefully. We're still waiting for that. So we've entered this new stage, hopefully final stage, to this venture. The Technical Chamber was instrumental in bringing this to a conclusion, and the president, I think, said it's an exam that's due this February 2013. Let me also highlight yet another thing that was said this morning. It's like I'm recapping right now. I'm summarizing everything that the president of the Technical Chamber of Greece referred to, what he talked to about this morning. And it's a good thing that procedures are being monitored and the progress made by energy inspectors is being followed up by experts as for us to make sure that we issue quality certificates. And already some sanctions were there because, like I said before, we keep track of qualitative certificates. It's a good thing that we've achieved a lot, and I'm sure that Mr. Theophylactos and others and other colleagues, I mean, on a personal note, I'm quite proud. I'm happy to notice progress. I'm happy to actually see that progress being made. And it's a good thing for me to know that progress being made because, in essence, some delays were there, but we managed to achieve the goals we'd set. What we've missed out on is the gap that's there in terms of our commitment and obligation to indeed proceed with inspections on boilers, heating and air conditioning units and facilities. We have to get everything done by 2014. In the relevant legislation, provision has been made. This is actually something that will instead happen and start as of 2013. It will go on until the end of 2015. So this was the background where we started at and where we managed to get. But this is a major achievement, and I do believe that you are actively involved in this process. You're not just taking part in everything that regards planning, solely planning in an integral manner for energy-saving buildings, which, of course, planning calls for cooperation. But did we really await for just the legislator to make it compulsory for us to work together? Because we are a team. Architects, engineers, electrical engineers, civil engineers, we're all working together. We're all working together with a view to putting buildings in place, constructing buildings. I think this was self-evident. Maybe some of you were working as a team. I guess that some of you were considering possibly constructing something new. You thought of it as a challenge. And maybe you tended to forget that you are working as a team, and maybe you opted for finishing your part and then expected the next colleague to do his bit or her bit, and then the next colleague to do their own. This is a process. This is a procedure, rather. Technically speaking, there's no problem whatsoever if this is your methodology. I'm a mechanical engineer. No problem. I can do whatever you want me to do, and it will work. There is technology, so since technology is there, we can do it. But the problems or issues become more complex and complicated when we introduce parameters such as the rational use of energy or by minimizing use of energy, starting with the envelope, starting with the shell of the building, starting with the more strict parts of our venture, because we want to make sure that we have possibly minimal energy wasted. And then you have the electromechanical facilities and equipment. Technology is progressing, it's making leaps and bounds, that's true. So minimum requirements and standards, minimum specifications will become stricter and stricter as time will go by. And then you get the building permit. You go to the relevant authorities, and first you have your design, your sketch, your blueprint. You think about what you can do. You're thinking about the location of the building, and then you have a few ideas about how this is going to work. And we are all doing this together, all of us as a team, just to make sure that this works out as best as possible. But what we need to gradually take into account now is the next step. Let's not lose track of the next step because, yes, you have the design and then you have the blueprint and everything's there. It's more complicated, but we're all working together. Then we proceed to the next stage, construction. We are paying attention to the details, and then you have the operation functions. It's okay. You have the commissioning, you have maintenance, you have to make sure that all systems are up and running throughout the lifetime of the building, and then that gets us to the renovation. And you talked about the building dying. That's what you said before. Throughout those successive stages, throughout those successive efforts, now it's apparent that we are all involved in all of this. Suppose we are having a meeting with a dear colleague and we are talking about the design. We have to take into account all the stages, not just the design. Design, construction, operation, function, renovation, and demolition eventually. We have to jointly take into account the different requirements. We have to consider the ideas, the options, potential interventions, and we have to be creative in our assessments too. These are basic questions, and that is why right now I have to underscore that a European project is underway right now. BEAM is all about information and data. Build or building information modeling is there today to allow us to have an idea about the lifetime of the building. And now we can assess the different requirements because everyone, architects, mechanics, mechanical engineers, civil engineers, have to be synthesized with other parameters that include the intentions of the owner of the building, the tenants, the occupants, the users, and so on. So this is a European project that is underway. It's going to eventually be there to complement what we need. And we're going to have a virtual lab. This virtual lab will allow us to collect scattered bits and pieces of information, to classify it, and then have different models and use them using IT, and then we are going to have cloud technology use. Cloud numerical simulation will help us. We will evaluate the different models. We will have a multi-model evaluation and management. And so we will be able, thanks to these cloud numerical simulations and the multi-model combinations and the configuration, we will be able to exchange information, exchange data, and IT, this cloud in particular, will allow me to see everything happen. We are faced with challenges that concern the existing building stock. We also have applications that have happened. There are ideas about passive solar systems. There is also scope for us to use, as we speak, solar energy for both cooling and heating purposes. So these are challenges, and then people can't help but wonder, if we have that, how come we just have a few pilot applications thereof in Greece instead of having such technology develop? What we need is applications in a great scale, because we have the building stock that I referred to earlier on, and from the stage of diagnosis, which is required, we have to move into the stage of gradual enforcement and implementation. And if you had the opportunity to attend all the speeches, to hear all the speakers today, I'm sure you've probably heard about what colleagues had to say There was a study that is already being publicized, and I would like to predict this. I expect that we are going to have the most significant drop in energy use in the forthcoming years. We are going to save more energy, I'm sure, and we're going to be more energy efficient in Greece in the years to come. When it comes to new buildings, we have to minimize heating and cooling charges and requirements. It's not like we are suggesting that we will be wasting energy because we're using RES. No. And then we're also taking into account those systems that are quite energy consuming, and then commissioning and retro CX and re-CX are very important. Maintenance is also a parameter I need to insist on. This is an entire procedure, but let me also briefly touch on how ASHRAE standards can help us. 90.1, which the President referred to in his introductory speech, is quite helpful because it refers to minimum requirements for the energy efficient use of buildings in the tertiary sector. And there is also 90.2, which provides minimum energy efficiency requirements for the design and construction of new residential dwelling units. You can always log on the web. You have access to ASHRAE and its website. And then you have 189.1 of 2011, which concerns high-performance green buildings. This is a holistic approach to green buildings. They require balancing energy efficiency, environmental responsibility, resource efficiency, and so on. There are guides, advanced energy guides that are also on offer free of charge. Just log on the web and visit the ASHRAE website. We have 30% guides, 50% guides. We can achieve higher targets. We can get better energy efficiency and performance. We can improve it for the sake of our buildings. All those guides are also available via the internet, again free of charge. You can always download them. Existing building guidance. These are millions of buildings. There are energy efficiency guides and standards. Let me also underscore one more thing. When it comes to using IT tools or software to adopt BIM, it seems that what's missing is interoperability. When you talk about assimilation, quite often there are problems there. There is high cost due to the fragmented nature of the building industry, which brought me back to BIM. And BIM is there to solve those issues. Chair, just a few more minutes. When it comes to ZEBs, well, these buildings hopefully will be there at the end of the decade, and they will bring down the requirements before you need to bring down the requirements before you tackle the problem to make them viable and sustainable. Low energy consumption buildings. I recently found out that 17 different terms are being used throughout Europe. Low energy buildings and another 16 different notions, be it passive house or minergy or effinergy and so on. These are all examples of the same idea and same notions. I'm not going to repeat what you heard this day, but there are such requirements, and this is what I insist on. Passive houses are there, effinergy and minergy is there. We can live in these buildings. Of course, these buildings may present us with certain challenges, and we have to remember that we have to achieve our goals. And already in Greece, we're getting a taste or a foretaste of what minimum energy requirements or minimum energy consumption means. I will not discuss whether one value, one measurement one would work for Greece throughout, but at least we are quantifying data today, and this will help us achieve our goals, because tomorrow in your offices you will be faced with your daily reality, and your daily reality as of today will have tomorrow, or as of tomorrow, will have to stick to those levels, which is exactly why we need education and training, which is exactly why we need to prepare for what will be indeed a reality as of tomorrow. The first steps have already been made. We have great potential, huge potential. Sometimes we hear people claim that there are no resources in Greece. Of course there's resources in Greece, and of course there's great scope for more energy. There is a huge capacity and potential. We are wasting energy, and if we stop wasting energy due to the economic conditions in our country, then we're going to sacrifice or lose part of our high living conditions. So we have to just remember what we're looking for. And because eventually there will come a point in time when we will try to just use what's been on offer thanks to research, let me remind you of what I said before. There is Tabula, www.building-typology.eu. This particular website will provide you with data and information on the type of buildings we are looking for, in order for us to eventually standardize buildings in Greece. And then you have EKIA, which will give you an assessment of the energy performance and required interventions for any building. You can log on www.energycon.org/AKIA-HTML, and so you will be able to eventually keep track of changes and be in touch with your customer. What we managed to do, dear colleagues, was certainly to just get on track, start working the path, the road. This was no smooth road. It was not just full of rosy petals, and yes, there were bumps on the road, there were ups and downs, there were turbulences. But you, as of today, tomorrow, Monday, you will be back to your offices. You will go back to your construction work sites, and now you will hopefully know and have come to realize that we, each and every one of us, can make a difference. We can make things better. Thank you very much. Let us thank Mr. Balaras for updating us. I asked you this morning to keep within the confines of, and just respect the timetable, but then again, I couldn't be too strict with Mr. Balaras because what he said was very interesting and pertinent, so maybe there are questions or comments, I don't know. Could you please explain to us? As briefly as you can. Could you please tell us more about the data you referred to earlier on? Will that data be a main source for BIM? Possibly, yes. Well, one thing is for sure. I think that the ministry already is capitalizing on that data, because we ourselves need to draw conclusions on the basis of this huge load of information. 189-1. Will it come to Greece? As the Technical Chamber of Greece president said this morning, he's working with us, ASHREP. A huge effort is being made. People are really interested, all stakeholders, and I guess the end recipients are interested in getting results soon too. More questions, maybe? I'm Yannis Kodoulis. I work for an installation company. A question to you. Do you believe that maybe in the next year or so, maybe 2 years, we are going to have a revision or amendments made to you values? Or will the coefficients change for ZEBs? I believe that the way things have been going so far, this entire venture is being constantly evaluated and re-evaluated. So I believe that all the processes and procedures, which in essence are guiding us. Yes, there is the European directive, the PVD, its recast, and then the evaluation. So all of that, I guess, will help us decide whether in due time we will have to have higher or higher values or coefficients, or maybe be more lax. I don't know. So I guess at the end of the line, you might get what you just referred to. There is reference to an automatic categorization and groupings of buildings. I'm just referring to energy inspections. I think you're referring to the abolition of exams. No. I'm talking to an automatic categorization. I guess what you're referring to is what has been referred to or talked to by some, but in all honesty, no one has ever brought this issue to the table. Never ever have I heard anyone speak about such a thing, even on a theoretical level. Now, nobody has ever talked about any such thing. This is the second time I'm being asked the same question in the last 10 days. So I guess there's a rumor going on, but then again, I've heard nothing about that, not even at the level of an idea, not even a theoretical idea. So I can't really give you an answer to that one. If you're asking, oh, you want my personal opinion, right, so now I get it. Well, I guess that what I show to you is knowledge and data. So I'm looking forward to developments. Like I said, I expect the existing buildings to change. Now, that's one thing. What will happen once that happens, I don't know. Because you see, the energy performance certificates are not just there for the sake of them being issued, because what matters is what lies behind the certificate. Suppose you went to the doctor and you were diagnosed with something, but you just left their practice. You will just stay there and get your medication. So this is what we're going to do. Once it turns out that we can't actually manage everything, then we will have to look into what we can do to improve the current situation. So that's what I expect will happen. To my mind, what you just suggested is impossible. You cannot have that, especially given the current situation in terms of know-how and knowledge, and especially given the image we have about the existing building stock. That's for sure. One last question, because we run out of time. Microphone, just wait for the microphone, please, for you to be heard. A question to you, Dr. Balaras. There are many passive house standards. There's no cool house standard, is there? There's Pascal and another couple of... Well, Pascal is okay. No, I'm just referring to a European-wide standard. I believe that the forthcoming speaker, the next speaker, is going to tackle exactly the subject you just broached. So yes, it's like you asked this question to introduce the next speaker. Yes, the only thing I can say is that indeed, quite often when you take a standard from abroad, you have to be very careful and cautious, because you're transplanting that, transposing it to our own climate. Let's not forget about how important it is to actually protect our buildings from the sun, and we have to make sure they breathe, because there is heat accumulation and there is a certain periodicity when it comes to sunlight, or even in the winter, because the Mediterranean winter is not exactly the Nordic winter. You get breaks, nice sunny breaks in between, even in January. You know that. You know the buildings react to that. The buildings indeed will react just as long as you prep them correctly. Thank you very much, Mr. Balaras. Thank you for bearing with me, Chair.